On this Friday night, getting a handle on COVID-19 in Canada. Children now form the majority of cases.
Health Canada regulators are working extremely hard.
How long before this group gets vaccinated? The promise in a pill.
This is a very, very promising result.
Pfizer's new line of protection against the virus. The Rogers rumble. A BC justice decides who's in charge, plus seeking safety.
They are leaving their safe houses and they were disappointed and hopeless.
The Afghans on the run. Will Canada help?
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with breaking news and the family feud that has often been compared to Succession, a TV drama. The battle over control of the board at Rogers Communication came to a head at BC Supreme Court today. A justice ruled Edward Rogers was within his power to remove and replace 5 directors. Global's Paul Johnson is at BC Supreme Court in Vancouver with the latest. Paul.
Robin, the Rogers family feud is now set to escalate to the appeals court this afternoon. Justice Shelley Fitzpatrick ruled that the BC laws that govern the company's incorporation mean his control of voting rights in the family trust give him control of the board, not the opposing faction that had been led by his mother and his sisters. So that was a moment of clarity for the business community and the markets, one they'd been hoping for. But lawyers representing the sisters and the mother immediately said they're going to appeal this, and that's an appeal that's likely to hit the appeals court early next week. So what we're faced with now is the prospect of continued legal and corporate maneuvering. Or, as some observers are speculating, because this is essentially a family affair, maybe this is something that eventually gets settled over a kitchen table at some point here in the coming days and weeks. After all, the stakes are extremely high. On the line here is the prestige of one of Canada's best-known business families, and of course, what is going to be the future of the Rogers Company, one of our leading and best-known corporate brands, and at a critical time in their story, just as they're poised to close their multi-billion-dollar acquisition of Shaw Communications. Everybody's wondering how and if this is going to affect that. So, as you mentioned, if you're a fan of HBO's Succession, but you don't have HBO, we've got kind of our own Canadian version playing out up here. Stay tuned. Robin?
Probably one of the most interesting business stories in a long time, Paul. Thanks so much for that. Now to some cautious optimism about the state of the pandemic in Canada. New federal modeling shows major progress in getting the 4th wave under control. After surpassing 4,000 cases a day in September, that number is now averaging around 2,200. But keep in mind, the rate of decline is starting to slow. Canada's top doctor says we're not out of the woods yet.
Now's not the time to let our guard down. We may still be in for a challenging winter, and maintaining a cautious approach can help keep us safer as we move indoors with the arrival of colder weather.
One of the big unknowns headed into winter is when kids under 12 will get access to vaccines. They are not yet protected against the virus, and now they account for the bulk of Canada's new infections. Abigail Bimman has that story tonight.
While COVID cases are decreasing overall, the light green line in this new modeling shows cases among the youngest Canadians spiked during the 4th wave and are still the highest among all age groups. Dr. Tam says outbreaks in schools and daycares remain small.
Involving fewer than 4 cases, which suggests sensitive detection and rapid response to control spread.
Reality, right? This is where a lot of the cases are. The good parts about that is that we know that most kids who do get COVID do well.
Of course, contributing to the cases, children under 12 can't yet be vaccinated. As for 12 plus.
What's exciting about some of this is that what we're seeing in adolescents is that their uptake of the vaccine is very close to the overall adult uptake. And this is how you see the vaccine working. We don't see the burden of cases in that age group anymore.
It's been a week since the U.S. gave the green light for children 5 to 11 to get the shot, but there are no updates for us in Canada.
I would say to all parents that Health Canada regulators are working extremely hard, prioritize the review for this vaccine, but they need to do due diligence, and it will be in weeks and not months.
In the face of good indicators overall, the top doctors warned we could be in for a challenging winter, compounded by flu season.
Busy flu shot season?
Busy flu shot, yes.
The Prime Minister sent a message by getting his flu shot on camera.
In Saskatchewan, we are seeing some kids in hospital with other respiratory illnesses. So we need to remember that it's about COVID. It's also about the other illnesses that we do typically see in the winter for kids. So getting your flu shot is huge.
I suspect that the flu season this year is not going to be as mild as last year because our restrictions are not as strict.
Dr. Tam warning we're not out of the woods yet, and now is not the time to drop public health measures. With a potentially rough winter ahead, she says we'll probably be in a better position in the spring. Robin?
Abigail Bimman in Ottawa. Thanks, Abigail. Now to some promising news about another potentially game-changing treatment for COVID-19. One day after Merck's antiviral pill was approved in the UK, Pfizer says it has its own drug that proved highly effective in a clinical trial. Jamie Mauracher reports on how these treatments work and the difference they could make in the fight against COVID-19.
There may be new weapons in the fight against COVID-19. Pills, oral medications that represent the next frontier of treatment, and their early results have Canadian scientists excited.
If you can reduce hospitalization by roughly 90%, this is a very, very promising result.
So much so, Pfizer concluded its preliminary trial of 775 participants early after it saw high-risk adults with COVID who received the antiviral Paxlovid 3 to 5 days after symptoms began, had a dramatic reduction in hospitalizations and deaths.
Very high efficacy comes even to us as a surprise, exceeds our most visionary expectations.
Here's how it works. Protease enzymes function like a pair of scissors, cutting protein chains so the virus can quickly replicate. The protein inhibitor, Paxlovid, is designed to block the scissors' blades so it can't cut, and then it can't multiply.
Having another layer of a way to treat the virus directly as opposed to trying to prevent the virus is an effective strategy. And it's something that adds a lot of tools to our toolbox.
One that's cheaper and easier to administer than IV treatments like monoclonal antibodies. Critically, it could also be easier to mass produce, experts say, and distribute globally. Already, drug maker Merck has sold millions of dollars of its COVID-19 antiviral pill, Molnupiravir, which has shown to reduce severe COVID outcomes by 50%. It was approved in the UK Thursday.
I know that the pill does not take away from the vaccination. The vaccination is still really, really important, but this will reduce my symptoms. Hopefully, therefore, the infection will not take a hold on my chest and I won't end up in hospital.
Merck's pill is under review by Health Canada and the US FDA.
I do know that our regulatory colleagues are working as fast as they can.
Pfizer says it hasn't yet made submissions to regulators here, but it does plan to ask for emergency use authorization in the U.S. It hopes to get data to them later this month. Robin?
Mauracher in Toronto. Flags on federal buildings will be raised to full mast on Sunday ahead of honoring Canadian veterans. The flags will then be lowered Monday to recognize Indigenous Veterans Day. They will be raised again before being lowered on November 11th, Remembrance Day. Flags on federal buildings have flown at half-mast nationwide since May 30th, after the discovery of unmarked graves at the site of a former residential school in Kamloops. The government worked with the Assembly of First Nations to honor veterans and Indigenous peoples and will fly the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation's Survivors flag in Ottawa. To Afghanistan now, where countless families who help the Canadian military are still trapped, desperate to escape the Taliban. Up until now, many have hid in safe houses, waiting for the safe passage promised by Canada. But after months of inaction and dwindling funds, those houses are now shutting down. Jeff Semple reports.
Hundreds of Afghans and their families who supported Canada's military mission have been hiding for months in these secret safe houses, organized by Canadian veterans and paid for with private donations. But money and time have just run out.
Do you know where you're going to go with your family? We don't know exactly where we have to go.
We're hiding Ali's face because he used to work for the Canadian Forces. Last summer, his family left their home in Kandahar and came to Kabul, where they were told Canada was sending a rescue flight before the Taliban took over. Ali has received approval to move to Canada, but his wife and some of his children are still waiting for their applications to be processed. The family has been living in a safe house, but today they and hundreds of others were told they have to leave.
I went today, check a lot of houses, but it's too expensive to rent, for the rent. And now it's coming cold. In Kabul, there's snow and there's a lot of cold. We don't have the blankets.
Today, we have had to essentially evict everybody that we've been keeping in safe houses since July.
Mauracher, the Canadian veterans group managing the safe houses, raised $2 million in private donations. But after months of sheltering and feeding 2,000 Afghans, those funds have run out. The group says it has no choice but to close the safe houses.
These people very potentially could be harmed very needlessly because our government is not moving fast enough to help them.
Mauracher says the Canadian government has processed fewer than 1% of the refugee applications it's received. And while the government has committed around $80 million in humanitarian aid to the region, it has so far refused to provide any money directly for the safe houses. Global News asked the Canadian government numerous times whether it has any plans to provide funding for the safe houses in Afghanistan. In an emailed written statement, a spokesperson said that due to security considerations, they do not discuss operational details of their missions abroad.
They were disappointed and hopeless where they should go.
These Afghan refugees just arrived in Canada, but are worried for their family members back home. With few flights available, they were driven out of the country by a Canadian veterans group. A 6-hour treacherous trek across the border to Pakistan. But those road evacuations have now stalled.
A lot of the neighboring countries are a bit frozen at the moment. There's different requirements. We're not seeing many people get out by land.
Do you have anywhere to go tonight?
Not yet.
When we called Ali back, he just spent hours looking for another place to live.
They didn't give us the food today, and they told us if you don't leave the house, we will cut the electric and the water line too.
He says his family is running low on money and hope. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
Canada's economy got a boost in October. The national unemployment rate reached a pandemic-era low. 31,000 jobs were added last month, bringing the jobless rate down to 6.7%. It marks the 5th straight month that the unemployment rate has dropped. The hard-hit retail sector was one industry that saw a bump in jobs, but it was offset by a drop in employment in accommodation and food services. In Alberta, a cabinet minister has quit after allegations of heavy drinking at work. Devin Dreeshen says he resigned as Alberta's Minister of Agriculture and Forestry to focus on his health, though he will stay on as an MLA. Dreeshen was named in a lawsuit filed last month against Premier Jason Kenney's office. In the lawsuit, a former staffer claims she was wrongly fired after speaking out about a toxic work environment. The allegations have not been proven in court. Coming up, the video evidence in the case of 3 men charged with the murder of a black man. In the U.S., the trial of 3 white men charged in the murder of Ahmaud Arbery is underway. Last February, Arbery was out for a jog when he was fatally shot. The suspects were only charged after video of the incident stoked public outrage. Now there are already accusations of discrimination at play in the trial after a nearly all-white jury was selected. Jackson Proskow reports, and a warning, some of the images in this story may be disturbing.
Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael sought to confront Mr. Arbery and took their guns with them to do it.
On trial for murder, assault, and attempted kidnapping, the 3 men who chased down and killed Ahmaud Arbery now face a judge and jury. In opening statements, prosecutors allege Travis McMichael, Greg McMichael, and their neighbor William Roddy Bryan took it upon themselves to hunt down Arbery based on assumptions.
The defendants assumed the worst about Mr. Ahmaud Arbery and made their driveway decisions.
The McMichaels insist they were acting in self-defense while attempting to conduct a citizen's arrest of Arbery, who was out jogging. They told police they suspected Arbery was armed and responsible for recent burglaries in their neighborhood.
They're there to detain Ahmaud Arbery for the police. This is what the law allows.
The defense focused on the months leading up to the shooting, when Arbery was sometimes seen walking around a house under construction, the same property he visited the morning of the shooting. There's no evidence Arbery ever did anything but look around the site. The accused only called 911 after they began chasing him.
We think the only right verdict is not guilty on each and every count in this indictment.
Race will play a central role in the trial. There have been comparisons to a modern-day lynching. According to investigators, Travis McMichael, who shot Arbery, allegedly used a racial slur in the aftermath.
I'm very anxious about the trial beginning. I'm very hopeful that we'll get the correct verdict.
The makeup of the jury, with only one black person, has raised concern. The defense struck 11 of 12 prospective black jurors from the pool, drawing a rare rebuke from the judge.
This court has found that there appears to be intentional discrimination in the panel.
Like the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, charges in Arbery's death likely would not have happened were it not for the video, which surfaced months later. Now the accused not only face prosecution in Georgia, but also a separate trial on federal hate crime charges. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
Still ahead, the call to arms in Ethiopia's war as rebel forces advance.
You're watching Global National.
In Mexico, gunmen opened fire at a popular resort, killing 2 suspected drug dealers. It happened near the Hyatt Ziva Riviera Cancun, an all-inclusive resort in Puerto Morelos. The dramatic attack sent tourists scrambling for cover in the hotel. Police are calling it a confrontation between rival gangs. In Ethiopia, the military is calling on former soldiers to rejoin the ranks to fight advancing rebel forces. The rebels from the northern region of Tigray announced a new alliance with other anti-government groups. They're reportedly advancing towards the capital, but the government is digging in. It's declared a state of emergency and called on residents to pick up arms to defend the city. This week marked 1 year since the conflict erupted. In that time, thousands of people have been killed. Up next, the push to make global trade greener.
We need a revolution!
Thousands of young people marched through Glasgow today demanding more action over their future at the COP26 climate summit. Among them was high-profile activist Greta Thunberg, who has accused world leaders of making hollow commitments and pretending to take climate change seriously. Speaking at the rally, she went as far to say the summit was a failure.
They are actively creating loopholes and shaping frameworks to benefit themselves and to continue profiting from this destructive system. A 2-week-long celebration of business as usual and blah, blah, blah.
There is a high bar to meet the climate challenge. Take ships. They're huge emission hogs, but they're still vital for trade and travel. As Crystal Gumansing reports, a Canadian company has come up with a solution that sounds as simple as charging your phone.
Measuring by volume, nearly 90% of world trade goods are moved on water. The International Council on Clean Transport says if international shipping was a country, it would be the 6th largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions based on 2015 data.
I spent years building vessels and seeing around the world the impact that we have today with pollution.
Brent Perry is the CEO of Shift.
Power swap stations provide fresh energy within minutes.
The Canadian clean energy company won a contract to equip 20 vessels at the Port of Singapore with its pay-as-you-go power swap battery system. Think of the rechargeable battery you pop onto your power tools, but on a much larger scale. The project will ramp up to 1,600 vessels within the port's infrastructure.
Power swap, a practical solution to reduce the impact of climate change.
And by next year, Shift's Power Swap will also be used on boats in the UK to transfer workers to and from a wind farm.
will be charging them both on shore and using the wind generators themselves to charge the ships. So these guys will be able to go from being a heavy polluting element in a wind farm, which is a green energy producer, to now being a partner, if you want, in zero emission delivery of the whole entire ecosystem of the wind farm.
That holistic chain approach is gaining speed. Ahead of COP26, 9 major companies, including Amazon and IKEA, signed a pledge to only move cargo on ships using zero carbon fuels by 2040. But greening the entire industry may be as challenging as freeing a stuck ship in the Suez. A patchwork of electric and cleaner burning fuels is likely. The International Maritime Organization has set 2050 as its deadline for shipping companies to cut the amount of carbon dioxide emitted by vessels. World leaders meeting here in Scotland, just steps away from the River Clyde and its rich shipbuilding history, are set to come up with a plan that will protect global waterways. Meanwhile, energy and technology companies such as Shift are also gathering, sharing best practices, and hoping to get the attention of those leaders. Crystal Gamanson, Global News, Glasgow.
And that is Global National for this Friday. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, Your Canada is Madeira Park on the Sunshine Coast in British Columbia. Thank you to the Sorchik family for sharing the photo. We know they are very loyal viewers. There are beautiful spots all over Canada, so please send us your pictures. The email is viewers@globalnational.com. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.